The man who swore I was his forever just told someone else I was temporary. He didn't stumble. He didn't lower his voice. He said it the way you say, "It might rain later." Like it was obvious, unremarkable, already decided. I am standing outside his office door holding 2 cups of coffee, 6 weeks pregnant, and my hands have gone completely numb. My name is Elias Carter. I am 26 years old. I am an Omega. I am telepathic. And until approximately 47 seconds ago, I genuinely believed I was loved. I want to start there, with the believing, because it matters. It is embarrassing to admit how fully I believed it, how I had arranged my entire interior life around it, the way you arrange furniture around a fireplace. Everything pointing toward the warmth, everything angled to catch the light. I believed it when Reid first called me his, 3 years ago in the parking lot of a Thai restaurant on New Britain Avenue. His voice doing that low, unsteady thing it only does when something catches him off guard. I believed it on the ordinary mornings when he left coffee on my side of the sink before I woke up. Not a grand gesture, just a cup, just warm, just proof that he had thought of me before he thought of anything else. I believed it last Tuesday when he pressed his forehead to my temple in the dark and didn't say anything and didn't need to. I am telepathic, and I still did not see this coming. That is, objectively, hilarious. My power doesn't work the way people imagine when they picture mind reading. It is not a cinema screen playing everyone's private thoughts in high definition. It comes in surges, tied to emotional proximity and intensity, like catching the edge of a radio signal when you drive through certain parts of the city. Strong feelings bleed outward from people who aren't shielding them, and if I am close enough and my own defenses are down, I catch the signal whether I want to or not. Most days I keep it pressed flat under 6 years of practice. One firm rule, self-imposed and non-negotiable. I do not read Reid's mind. Not without his permission, not without cause, not ever. I have too much self-respect for that, and honestly, I have too much anxiety. There are things living in a person's head that their heart is absolutely not ready to know about. Turns out the heart finds out anyway, telepathy or not. Reid's office is on the 2nd floor of the Calloway Pack House, a tall colonial in the West Hartford neighborhood that smells like aged wood, bergamot, and the particular kind of quiet authority that settles into walls over generations. The Calloway family has held this territory for 4 generations. Walking into that house always felt like walking into something that had already decided what it was, which I personally found both impressive and slightly suffocating, but love makes you accommodate a great number of atmospheres. I come on Thursday afternoons when his schedule opens up. I bring coffee because Reid forgets to eat and drink when he is managing territory business, and someone in this relationship has to behave like a functioning adult. And apparently that someone is the Omega, who also reorganizes his sock drawer when he is stressed. I do not make a big deal about the sock drawer. It is a love language. He doesn't know about it. Moving on. I was in a genuinely good mood today. I know. It is painful in retrospect. I had spent the morning working from our bedroom, finishing a landscape consultation for a client in Simsbury, watching the November light go thin and silver over the backyard, and feeling, quietly, like my life was something I had chosen rather than something that had happened to me, which is not a feeling I take for granted. I grew up in a pack where Omegas were managed more than they were loved, where the word temporary was practically part of our job description, where every relationship came with a quiet expiration date that nobody wrote down, but everybody knew. Reid had felt different from the beginning. Reid had felt like permanence. I had a secret folded into the front pocket of my bag, a pregnancy test, positive, 6 weeks along, according to the clinic on Farmington Avenue, where I had gone alone on Monday morning, sitting in the waiting room in my good jacket with my hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm tea, trying to decide how I felt. Terrified, stunned, and underneath both of those, something that I had no clean word for, Something that felt like standing at the edge of an enormous open field and knowing you were going to walk into it, regardless. I had decided to tell him tonight over dinner. I had imagined his face, specifically the 2 seconds before he reassembled his alpha composure, when he would just look human and startled and completely unguarded. I had been looking forward to that face all week. I was still thinking about it, soft and warm and private, when I reached the second floor and saw that Reid's office door was open. Standard pack policy, open means you may approach. I approached. "She's not permanent, Marcus." Reid's voice, even and low, the voice he reserves for decisions he has already made and does not intend to revisit. "The arrangement was always temporary. You knew that. I knew that. The only question now is timing." A beat of silence. Then Marcus, Reid's second in command, dry as paper. "Does Elias know that?" Another pause. 1 second. 2. "He will." I did not mean to slip into Reid's head in that moment. The volume knob turned itself, the way it does when the emotional charge in a room crests high enough. And what hit me was not a full thought or a sentence. It was a shape, a feeling, dense and utterly without conflict. Resolved. Reid felt completely resolved. I stood in the hallway with both cups of coffee going cold and understood, with a clarity that had nothing to do with my power and everything to do with the simple human language of being set aside, that I was not part of whatever future Reid Calloway had quietly constructed for himself. I put one cup down on the hall table, very gently. I kept the other because I paid $4 for it, and I am not wasteful. I walked back down the stairs 1 step at a time, my hand on the banister, my breathing steady, my face doing something I couldn't entirely feel yet. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. Hartford in November is gray and unbothered, trees stripped clean, sky the color of an unanswered call. The light in Reid's office window stayed on. He was still up there, talking, deciding things, feeling resolved about me. My hand found my stomach, flat, still, secret. "Okay," I said, to no one, to the gray sky, to the small, impossible thing growing in me that didn't have a heartbeat I could feel yet, but was somehow the only warm thing left in my chest. Change of plans. I am Elias Carter. I am 26 years old, telepathic, 6 weeks pregnant, and apparently temporary. I started the car. Then I sat there with the engine running and did not move for 4 full minutes because my body had apparently decided that starting the car was a complete and sufficient plan. And the rest of it, the actual driving away, the deciding where to go, the figuring out what my life looks like now, was a problem for someone else. The heater kicked on. Warm air hit my face. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. Steady. Both of them completely steady. That should have felt like strength. It felt like shock wearing strength's coat and hoping nobody would notice the difference. Temporary, not complicated, not uncertain, not the word of a man who was wrestling with something difficult. Reid had said it the way you state a fact about the weather, the way you say it's getting cold or traffic's bad on I-84 on Fridays, the kind of sentence that assumes the other person already understands the basic premise and just needs the update. He had said the arrangement. The arrangement. 3 years, a shared apartment on Prospect Avenue with his coffee mug permanently on my side of the sink and my succulents on his windowsill because the light was better there, and his flannel shirt that I had technically stolen and never gave back living in my half of the closet. 3 years of Sunday mornings and difficult conversations and the specific kind of quiet that only exists between two people who have chosen each other enough times that silence feels like another form of saying so. The arrangement. I pulled out of the driveway. Look, I want to be clear about something. I am not a person who cries in cars. I have a strict personal policy about this because crying while driving is a visibility hazard, and I take road safety seriously. And also because I have cried in a car exactly once in my adult life, and it was in a McDonald's parking lot over a wrong order, and I still haven't fully forgiven myself for that one. So I was not going to cry. I was going to drive somewhere and think. And thinking was going to produce a logical next step. And the logical next step was going to produce an action. And the action was going to produce a version of my life that was not currently sitting in the ruins of an assumption I had apparently built on sand. I got 3 blocks before I had to pull over. Not to cry, I want to make that clear. I pulled over because my hands had started shaking, which is different from crying and is actually a completely reasonable physiological response to discovering that your mate, your bonded alpha, the person whose scent you can pick out in a crowd of 100 people, had been running a quiet clock on you that you never knew existed. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. The leather was cold against my skin. "He will," Reid had said when Marcus asked if I knew. He will. Not, he already knows. Not, we've talked about it. Not even the decency of a lie. Just 2 words, clean and forward-facing. The tense of a plan. Like telling me was a task on a list he hadn't gotten to yet. Like I was a conversation he was going to have on his schedule. When it was convenient, when the timing was right, when whatever it was he actually wanted had been secured first. I lifted my head. The street outside was ordinary and indifferent. A row of oaks with their leaves completely gone. A neighbor's porch light coming on in the early dark. A kid on a bike with one hand in his jacket pocket, like balance was optional. Hartford just existing, entirely unbothered by the fact that my life had just reorganized itself around a single overheard sentence. I put my hand on my stomach again. 6 weeks. There is something genuinely absurd about being pregnant and finding out you are temporary in the same week. The universe has a comedic timing problem, and I intend to file a formal complaint at some point. What I am growing right now is not yet the size of a grape, but it already has opinions, because every time I have felt uncertain this week, my entire midsection has done this low, warm, insistent pulse that I can only describe as stay focused, which is either biology or attitude, and honestly, with my genes, probably both. I was not going to tell Reid now. That thought arrived so cleanly, so without debate, that I almost laughed. No, I was not going to walk back up those stairs with my cold coffee and my positive pregnancy test and my quietly demolished heart and hand him something he could incorporate into whatever timeline he had already drawn up for me. I was not going to let this child become a footnote in the arrangement. I was not going to let the first fact of this baby's existence be that his father had already decided his other parent's expiration date. Not a chance. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, Reid's name on the screen. I stared at it. It buzzed again. Here's the thing about being telepathic that nobody thinks about. You spend your whole life knowing too much about what people feel, catching the edges of emotions they never intended to show you, and it makes you extraordinarily good at one very specific thing, recognizing when something is performance. Reid calling right now, within minutes of that conversation, the timing too neat, too aware, like someone checking that a thing is still in its place before they need to move it. I declined the call, put the car in drive. I had one place I could go tonight, one person who would open the door without asking questions first, pour something warm into a mug, sit across from me on her couch with her feet tucked under her, and wait until I was ready to talk. My best friend Cora Webb, who lived 20 minutes north in Bloomfield, who was a beta and a registered nurse, and the only human being on earth who knew about the pregnancy test, and who had said, when I showed her the result 3 days ago, "Whatever you decide, I'm already on your side." I needed someone on my side right now. I got on Route 44 heading north, the highway gray and wide, the sky going the color of old ash above the tree line, Hartford disappearing in my rearview mirror, one exit at a time. Reid's name appeared on my screen again. Third call. I let it ring out, watching the road. My hands were steady again, which was good, which was necessary, which I was choosing to interpret as a sign that my nervous system had assessed the situation and concluded that falling apart on Route 44 in the dark was not a viable option and had adjusted accordingly. I appreciated the collaboration. The drive to Bloomfield took 19 minutes. I know because I counted. Not the minutes exactly, more the small things inside them. The number of times Reid called before he stopped. 4. The number of exits I passed without second-guessing my direction. All of them. The number of times I reached for my phone and then didn't pick it up. 3. Which I am counting as a personal victory and a sign of enormous emotional maturity. Cora's building was a 2-story brick walk-up on Tunxus Avenue with a broken light above the entrance that her landlord had been promising to fix since March, and a doormat that said, "Go away," in cheerful yellow letters, which was the most accurate piece of home decor I had ever encountered and one of the reasons I loved her. I parked on the street, sat for exactly 2 seconds, got out. I rang her bell. The intercom crackled. "Who is it?" "Me." A pause. Then, with the particular tone of someone who is reading a situation through a 2-inch speaker, "Elias, why do you sound like that?" "Like what?" "Like someone who has been very calm for a very concerning amount of time." "Cora." "Yeah?" "Buzz me in." She buzzed me in. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor, door already open by the time I reached the top of the stairs. Cora standing in the frame in her scrubs and thick socks, brown hair in a knot, reading glasses pushed up on her head like she had forgotten they were there. She looked at my face and did not say anything for a moment. She just stepped back and held the door wider. That was the thing about Cora. She did not make you explain yourself at the door. I walked in. The apartment was warm and smelled like the chamomile tea she drank every evening, and the lavender candle on her coffee table, and faintly of the takeout containers in her kitchen trash. It was deeply, almost aggressively normal, and I stood in the middle of it and felt the tightness in my chest shift into something that was not quite relief, but was at least adjacent to it. Cora closed the door behind me. She crossed the room, picked up the kettle and said, "Talk." "He called me temporary." The kettle stopped moving. Cora set it down on the counter very slowly, turned around. Her expression was doing something careful and controlled. The nurse face, the one she used when she was receiving information that required a measured response, and not, for instance, the immediate response of a best friend who was about to say 14 very specific things about a man she had always been politely skeptical of. "Say that again," she said. "I went to the pack house. His door was open. I heard him tell Marcus that the arrangement with me was temporary and that I'd find out when the timing was right." Silence. "The arrangement," Cora said. Those were his words. She breathed through her nose once, very slowly. "And you are using that calm voice right now, which means you have been reasonable about this for approximately the last 30 minutes, and you are about to stop being reasonable." "I am still being reasonable." "Elias." "I'm fine, Cora. You drove 20 minutes in the dark to my apartment instead of going back inside and asking him what he meant, which means you already know what he meant or you're terrified of confirming it. And either way, you need to sit down and drink something." I sat down. She brought me tea in the mug that said, "I survived another meeting," that could have been an email, which she had given me as a birthday gift 2 years ago, and which now permanently lived on her shelf for my visits. I wrapped both hands around it. "He called 4 times on the way here," I said. "I didn't pick up." "Good." "I don't know if that's good." "It's good," she said, folding herself onto the opposite end of the couch, tucking her feet under her. "You needed space before words. Words right now would have just been a performance from both of you." She was not wrong. That was the frustrating thing about Cora. She was almost never wrong about people, which made her spectacular to have in your corner and occasionally exhausting as a conversational opponent. I stared at my tea. Steam rose off the top in thin curls. "I'm not going to tell him about the baby," I said. Cora's eyes came up from her mug. Steady, not surprised. "Not tonight," she said. not a question. Not at all. Not yet. I turn the mug slowly in my hands. I need to understand what I walked into before I hand him something he can use. Use, she repeated, quiet and careful. I don't mean that he'd be cruel about it. I paused. I don't think I mean that. I just mean that right now I don't know what his plan is, and walking back in there pregnant feels like showing up to a negotiation without knowing the other side has already decided the outcome. Cora considered this for a moment. That, she said, is the most clear-headed you have ever sounded while your world was on fire. Thank you. I've been practicing. When did you get so strategic? Approximately 47 minutes ago when I found out my life had an expiration date I wasn't informed about. She almost smiled. It was a sad almost, the kind that lives right at the edge of something harder. She reached over and put her hand on my knee for exactly 3 seconds, which was Cora's version of a long hug. What do you want to do? She asked. Good question. Excellent question. The question I had been driving toward without quite having the language for it yet. What did I want? I wanted to unhear that sentence. I wanted to rewind to 47 minutes ago and stand in that hallway with both cups of coffee still warm and my secret still safe, and the version of Reid I had believed in still intact. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted my telepathy to have glitched for the first time in 6 years at the exact worst moment possible. I wanted all of that with the kind of hunger that sits too deep to be called a want, that lives closer to grief than desire. But wanting the past back was a hobby for people with more time than me. I had a child growing in me. I had a plan that no longer existed. I had a bonded alpha who had apparently been drawing up quiet exit papers while I was reorganizing his sock drawer. And I had, as of right now, approximately 0 information about who he was drawing them up for, which was a detail that my telepathy, useless and irresponsible instrument that it was, had not managed to supply. I need to know what the plan actually is, I said. Not just that there is one. I need to know what he is moving toward, who he is moving toward. I looked up at Cora, and then I need to decide whether I am still going to be in Hartford when he gets there. The room went very quiet. Outside, a car passed on Tunxus Avenue. The candle flame on the coffee table leaned gently sideways and recovered. Cora looked at me for a long time. You're thinking about leaving, she said. Not an accusation, just a fact being placed carefully on the table between us, the way you put down something fragile that needs to be looked at properly. I'm thinking about the fact that I have never in my life made a decision based on what was best for me first, I said, and I have a pretty specific reason to start. My hand found my stomach. Not dramatically, just naturally the way it had been doing all week, the same way you reach for a phone or a key, something you need close. Cora watched the gesture. Her expression did something complicated. Okay, she said softly. Okay? Okay, you figure out what you need to know, and then you figure out what you need to do. She tilted her head slightly. And Elias? Yeah? Whatever it is, you don't do it alone. My phone buzzed on the cushion beside me. Reid's name. 5th call. I looked at it. The chamomile steam curled up between us, thin and warm and disappearing. I picked up the phone, turned it face down, set it back on the cushion. Tell me, Cora said, that you have an actual plan and not just a feeling. I have the beginning of a plan, I said. That's terrifying. Probably. How long do you need? I thought about the shape of what I had felt in Reid's mind. Dense, resolved. A decision so settled it had already stopped being a decision and become a fact. Long enough to find out what he's already decided, I said, and short enough that he doesn't realize I'm looking. Cora absorbed this. You're going to read him. I'm going to be in the same room as him and stop pretending I don't notice things. That's the same thing. It's subtly different, and I'd appreciate it if you let me have that. She put her mug down, looked at me with the particular expression she wore when she had 17 opinions and was selecting the most useful one. You have never once read Reid's mind without his permission, she said. You made that rule on your second date, and you've kept it for 3 years. I know. Breaking that rule means you've already decided something. I looked down at the phone. Reid's name still lit faintly through the case. Yeah, I said quietly. I think I have. Cora picked up her mug again, took a slow sip. The candle flame leaned left in some draft neither of us could feel. Then you already know what comes next, she said. I know what comes next, I agreed. And you're scared. I am not scared. Elias. I am mildly apprehensive. That's just scared with better vocabulary. Fair point. Completely fair point. I chose not to acknowledge it out loud because I had a personal brand to maintain. What I was, if I was being honest in the privacy of my own skull, was something closer to a tightly coiled version of scared, wrapped around a core of something colder and more deliberate. The scared part was the easy piece to name. The colder part was harder. It felt like standing in a room you have loved for years and suddenly seeing, for the first time, exactly where all the exits are. Reid had called 5 times. The 6th call came while I was still sitting on Cora's couch, and I watched my own name light up on his screen in my head, the way I always could when he thought of me while dialing. That particular warm gold frequency of someone whose emotional signature I knew better than my own heartbeat. Even now, even knowing what I knew, his frequency was warm. That was the thing that made my chest do the complicated, half-collapsed thing it had been doing since the hallway. Reid was not cold. Reid had never been cold toward me. Every piece of warmth he had ever shown me had been real. I knew the difference between performed emotion and genuine feeling better than anyone alive, and Reid's feelings for me had never once registered as performance. The warmth was true, which meant something I didn't have clean language for yet. Something that sat in the space between he loved me and he had already decided to leave. And the fact that both of those things appeared to be true simultaneously was a complexity I needed more information before I could properly dismantle. I picked up on the 6th call. Elias, his voice immediate and low and carrying something I recognize as controlled concern, the specific register of an alpha who has been sitting with a decision for too long and needs the situation to return to known coordinates. Hey, I said. A beat. Where are you? Out. Another beat, longer. I called. I know, I was driving. You didn't call back. I'm calling back now, I said. What's up? The silence on his end had a texture to it. I was not reading him. I was not reaching toward his frequency at all. I didn't need to, because Reid Calloway had a very specific quality of silence for every emotional state, and the silence he was currently producing was the one that meant he was trying to decide how much of something to say. Come home, he said. Not, where are you? I was worried. Not, I need to talk to you about something. Just the command, quiet and direct, the alpha in him reaching for the simplest available instrument. 2 months ago, that tone would have pulled at something in my chest in a way that was almost embarrassing to admit. The particular low frequency of it, the way it carried the specific weight of being wanted back inside a shared space, had always done something to my nervous system that my brain had zero jurisdiction over. Right now, it landed differently. Right now, it sounded like someone calling a thing back to its place on a shelf. I'm at Cora's, I said. I'll be home later. How much later? I don't know yet. We're talking. A pause. Is everything okay? I looked at the candle flame. Sure, I said. Everything's fine. I'll see you tonight. I ended the call before he could respond. Cora was watching me with the expression she reserved for patients who were being braver than was strictly advisable. Clinically impressed, slightly worried, saying nothing because she had correctly identified that I was in a phase that required silence more than commentary. I set the phone down. Good? She asked. Functional, I said. That's basically the same thing in your case. I stood up, paced once to the window, looked out at Tunxus Avenue, the streetlights doing their best against the November dark. A dog walker moving quickly past with three dogs who clearly had three different opinions about the pace and direction of the walk. Normal. Everything out there completely and infuriatingly normal. I need to go back tonight, I said. I know. Not because he told me to. I turned from the window. Because I need to be in that space with my defenses down and find out what I actually walked into. I can't do that from here. Cora nodded slowly. How are you going to play it? Normal, I said. Completely normal. I came from a friend's. I had a nice evening. I'm tired. No confrontation, no questions. Nothing that tells him I was at that door. You can do that? Cora, I have been managing what I accidentally know about people for 6 years. I can absolutely perform a normal Tuesday evening. It's Thursday. I know what day it is. I'm using Tuesday as a metaphor. She almost smiled again, the sad almost. And if he tries to talk to you, if he's decided tonight is the night for the conversation? I thought about the shape of what I had felt in his mind. Resolved. Dense. Already decided. Then I'll know something I didn't know before, I said. Cora unfolded herself from the couch and came to stand in front of me. She was several inches shorter than me and managed to be completely unbothered by this when she was trying to make a point. She put both hands on my shoulders. Listen to me, she said. You are going to walk back into that house. You are going to be calm, and you are going to be smart, and you are going to get the information you need. And then, Elias, whatever you decide after that, I need you to promise me that you are deciding for you. Not for him, not for the bond, for you and that baby. My throat did something inconvenient. I know, I said. Promise me. I promise. She held my gaze for another second, checking, the way she checked vitals, not looking for reassurance, but for actual confirmation of stability. Then she let go, stepped back, and picked up my coat from the arm of the couch. Take the tea with you, she said. You didn't finish it. I'll bring the mug back. I know you will. You always do. The drive back to Hartford took 19 minutes in the opposite direction. I did not count things this time. I let the highway exist without cataloging it, let the dark sit on either side of Route 44 without trying to organize it into meaning. My mind was doing something I had trained it to do in difficult situations, which was to go quiet and wide rather than loud and narrow, expanding outward rather than clenching inward, the way you open a hand rather than make a fist. It was a focus technique. My first telepathy teacher, a dry-humored older Omega named Dr. Fenn, who operated out of a brownstone in New Haven, had taught it to me at 19. He had said, "The mind under pressure tries to compress. Your job is to keep it open. Compressed minds miss things." I had been compressing since the hallway. I opened. The city came back to me as I took the Prospect Avenue exit, its nighttime frequency settling over me like a familiar weight. Hartford had its own emotional texture, something I had learned over 3 years of living here, something I could feel at the edges of my perception without trying. Old territory, layered pack history, the weight of claimed land that went back further than the current generation of Callaways. Reid's territory. I turned onto Prospect Avenue. Our building was a converted Victorian about 3 blocks from the pack house, a personal choice Reid had made when he was 24, separating his private life from his alpha responsibilities with clear physical distance, which I had always thought was psychologically healthy and now reconsidered as possibly also being strategically convenient. The lights were on upstairs. I parked, sat for one breath, got out. The lobby smelled like the old wood floors in the gardenia plant that the first-floor neighbor, Mrs. Adeyemi, kept by her door, and underneath both of those, Reid's scent. Bergamot and something darker, something that lived under the surface of every alpha's signature, the particular warmth of dominant biology doing what it did, regardless of everything else. My body responded to it the way it always did. the involuntary softening at the base of my spine, the slight expansion in my chest, the pull. I told my body to behave itself. My body lodged a formal protest. I took the stairs. Reid was in the living room when I opened the door, standing at the window with a glass of water in his hand, already turned toward the door before I had it fully open. His scent hit me immediately. Bergamot and warm wood and something underneath it tonight that I couldn't name yet. Something that my nervous system registered as significant before my brain caught up. He looked at me. I looked at him. 6'2", dark hair that needed cutting, gray eyes that had always been his most honest feature because Reid Calloway controlled everything about himself except his eyes. Right now, those eyes were doing the thing they did when he was relieved and trying not to show how relieved. The slight widening, the very small drop in the tension around his brow. He was genuinely glad I was home. I filed this information. "Hey," I said. I took my coat off, hung it on the hook. Casual, easy, a person returning from an unremarkable evening. "Hey," he said. His voice was careful, not cold, careful. "Sorry I didn't pick up earlier. I had my hands full with the car, and then we got talking." I moved into the kitchen, set Cora's mug in the sink, ran the tap. "She sends her love, by the way." A beat. "That's good," he said. I turned around and leaned against the counter. This was the thing about Reid that I had always found both compelling and, in this specific moment, deeply complicated. He was not a liar, not exactly. He was a man who managed information, who controlled the pace and content of what he shared, the way he controlled everything, deliberately and with a view to outcome. He had never told me an active untruth. He had been exquisitely precise about what he chose to tell me and when, which, now that I was looking at it from the outside, was its own variety of dishonesty. His eyes moved over my face. I kept my expression where I had put it, warm, tired, ordinary. He took a step toward me. My telepathy stayed flat. I was not going to read him yet. I needed him comfortable first. I needed him to believe that tonight was ordinary, that I was ordinary, that nothing between us had shifted in the last 3 hours. I needed the version of him that was not performing alpha calm, but simply existing in what he thought was a known and controlled situation. So I held my ground and waited. He stopped about 2 feet in front of me, close enough that his scent surrounded me completely, that warm bergamot wrapping around everything, the traitor biology of the bond doing its quiet, insistent work, regardless of what I knew with my conscious mind. "You look tired," he said. "Long day," I said. He lifted his hand and tucked a piece of hair back from my forehead. Slow, gentle. The exact gesture he had made approximately 300 times in 3 years. So familiar it lived in my muscle memory. So gentle it cost me more right now than anything harsh could have. His eyes were soft. My chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with the bond. "Come sit down," he said. I went still, because underneath the bergamot, underneath the warmth and the familiar and the soft eyes, something in his emotional frequency had just shifted. Something that my involuntarily open mind caught at the edge of perception. Barely a signal, barely a word, but I caught it. Not yet. 2 words, a decision. The same quality of dense resolve I had felt outside his office door, surfacing for just 1 second before he pressed it back down. He was not going to tell me tonight. He had looked at me, taken my measure, and decided the timing was not right. My hand pressed flat against the counter behind me. "Sure," I said softly. "Let me just change first." I walked past him to the bedroom, closed the door, stood in the dark for 1 full breath. Then I opened my eyes, looked at the room we had shared for 2 years, all the ordinary evidence of a life I had believed was permanent, and began, very quietly, to make a plan. The plan had 3 parts. Part 1, stay calm. Part 2, get information. Part 3, decide what the information meant before Reid decided it for me. Simple, clean. extremely difficult to execute when you were standing in the middle of a bedroom that smelled like the person you had organized your entire emotional life around, and your hands were doing that inconvenient shaking thing again. I pressed both palms flat against my thighs. "Stop it," I told my hands. My hands were unconvinced. The bedroom was exactly as I had left it that morning. His side of the bed, my side of the bed. His jacket over the chair by the window, the one he always left there despite the perfectly functional hook on the back of the door. A habit I had surrendered arguing about 18 months ago. My succulents on the windowsill catching the lamplight from outside. The framed photo on the dresser, the one Cora had taken at Colt Park last summer. Reid with his arm around my shoulders and his head tilted slightly toward mine. Both of us squinting against the sun. Both of us laughing at something just outside the frame. I used to walk past that photo every morning and feel lucky. I picked up a sweater from the chair, put it on, took 3 slow breaths, then I lowered every wall I had. This is not something I do casually. Dropping my shields is not like taking off a jacket. It is more like removing a structural wall from a building. Everything gets louder, heavier, more present. The ambient, emotional frequency of every person within range pressing in at once with no filter between me and the signal. In a city like Hartford, in a pack house 3 blocks away, in an apartment building with 6 other units, the volume was significant. But I had a target. I let my perception expand the way Dr. Fenn had taught me, slow and outward rather than grasping, the way you cast a line rather than plunge your hand into water. I was not taking anything from Reid. I was simply stopping the practice of looking away. His signal found me immediately. That warm gold frequency, bergamot at the edges, and underneath it the same layered, emotional architecture I had been carefully not reading for 3 years. I knew the shape of his feelings the way you know the layout of a room you have lived in a long time. Not because you have examined it, but because you have moved through it enough times that your body knows where the furniture is. What I found was not what I expected. I had prepared myself for something cold, something that would confirm the version of Reid I had been building in the car since Prospect Avenue, the controlled man with his quiet exit plan and his conversation about the arrangement. I had prepared myself to find detachment, calculation, the emotional signature of someone who had already moved on while technically still present. What I found instead was pain, not cold, not detached, pain. The dense, pressurized kind that lives in a person who has been sitting on something enormous for a long time. The kind that looks like calm from the outside because the alternative is collapse. Underneath it, like bedrock under soil, was something I had no word for except grief. Reid was grieving. I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands had stopped shaking. I pressed further, carefully, the way you press a bruise to understand its edges. This was not idle reading. This was deliberate, and I had made my peace with the ethics of it on Route 44. I needed the shape of what I was dealing with. What I got came not as words but as layered feeling, the way emotional reads almost always came, a stack of impressions that my brain assembled into meaning. I pulled them into order as best I could. There was love, present tense, not past, not fading, active and enormous and deeply familiar. That was Reid's feeling for me, unchanged, and the unexpectedness of finding it intact hit me somewhere behind the sternum with a force I was not prepared for. There was guilt, older than the love, or at least heavier, the kind that had been accumulating longer. Guilt with a specific texture, not the guilt of someone who had done something cruel, but the guilt of someone who had run out of ways to avoid doing something inevitable. And underneath both of those, the thing that made me go very still on the edge of the bed. Fear. Reid Calloway, who commanded a territory with complete authority, whose emotional signature had never once registered anything I would classify as fear in 3 years, was afraid. Specifically and precisely afraid. The fear pointed outward, not inward. The fear of a man who was not scared for himself. He was scared for me. I pulled back, sat with that for a moment, sat with the fact that whatever the arrangement and temporary and the timing meant, it was not the simple story I had been telling myself in the car. This was not a man who had decided to trade me in quietly and was waiting for the convenient moment to let me know. This was a man carrying something I did not have the full shape of yet, something that was costing him in ways he was not showing, and the fear he was feeling was pointed in my direction. I needed specifics. I could not get specifics from emotional impression alone. Feelings gave you the weather. They did not give you the map. I changed into the sweater, ran my fingers through my hair, arranged my face into something that looked like the end of a normal evening, and went back into the living room. Reid was sitting on the couch. He had his phone face down on the cushion beside him, which he only did when he had been on a call he did not want me to walk in on. And he looked up when I came in with that careful quality still in his expression, that measured calm he was working too hard to maintain. I sat in the armchair across from him. This was a choice. I usually sat beside him. He noticed. "You okay?" he asked. "Tired," I said. "Long week." He nodded. I looked at him. Really looked, the way I had been carefully not doing for 3 years, out of respect and self-preservation, letting myself see past the architecture of his composure to the thing underneath it. His jaw was tight. The hand resting on his knee had a very slight tension in the fingers. His eyes, when they met mine, did the thing they did when he was editing himself. "Reid," I said. "Yeah. Is there something you want to tell me?" The question landed quietly in the room. I watched his jaw tighten further, watched his eyes do a thing that took approximately half a second and contained several decisions. "No," he said. "Why?" "You just seem like you have something on your mind." "Territory stuff," he said. "Nothing you need to worry about." Nothing you need to worry about. That sentence. I had heard that sentence from Reid approximately 40 times in 3 years, and I had always accepted it as a form of protection, as evidence of his instinct to shield me from the more difficult elements of pack politics, which I had chosen to read as care rather than exclusion. Right now it sounded different. Right now it sounded like a door closing. "Okay," I said. He relaxed slightly. The tension in his hand eased by a fraction. "Come here," he said, holding out one arm. And here was the thing. Here was the complicated, devastating, entirely unfair thing. My body moved before I made a decision. 3 years of muscle memory, 3 years of his scent and his warmth, and the specific gravity of that arm held out toward me. And I was across the room and settling against his side before my brain had filed the appropriate objections. His arm came around me. His scent surrounded me completely. I pressed my face against his shoulder and closed my eyes. His heartbeat was steady under my ear. A little fast, just a little. I flattened my perception wide. And that was when it arrived. Not a feeling this time, a specific, surface-level thought, the kind that slips through when a person is emotionally overwhelmed and physically close to someone whose presence lowers their guard. Reid's thought, clear as a signal breaking through static, in his own voice and his own cadence. "If Harlan finds out about the baby, I lose everything." I stopped breathing. Harlan Cross, alpha of the Cross Pack in Providence, the most politically powerful pack leader in New England, a man I had met exactly once at a territory summit 8 months ago and immediately disliked with a precision that I had trusted as instinct. If Harlan finds out about the baby. Reid knew about the pregnancy. I do not know how long I sat there, seconds probably, measured by the steady thump of Reid's heart under my ear, completely unaware that I had just dismantled the entire architecture of what I thought was happening. The baby I had been carrying alone since Monday morning. The secret I had kept in the front pocket of my bag. The positive test from the Farmington Avenue clinic. Reid already knew. And the name attached to the fear, the specific person the fear was pointed toward, was not me. It was Harlan Cross. I pulled back slowly, carefully, giving him nothing to read in my face. I pressed a kiss to his jaw, felt him exhale, felt the tension in him ease the way it always did when I did that. 3 years of bond chemistry doing its automatic work. "I'm going to get some water," I said softly. "You want anything?" "No," he said. His voice was quiet. His hand ran briefly down my back as I stood, that absent, habitual gesture. I walked to the kitchen, turned the tap on, stood with the water running cold over my fingers and my mind running at a speed that had nothing calm about it. Reid knew about the baby. Reid was afraid of Harlan Cross finding out. Reid had called me temporary to his second-in-command, with the same steady voice he used for territory decisions. Reid was grieving. Reid was guilty. Reid was afraid for me. Every piece of this was true simultaneously, and I could not yet see how they connected, but I could feel the shape of something enormous underneath them, the way you can feel the depth of water before you see how far down it goes. One thing I knew with complete certainty, the kind of certainty that my power delivered without ambiguity when a truth was clean and uncontested. I could not stay in this apartment tonight, not because I did not love him. The love was there, present and undeniable, and honestly inconvenient given the circumstances. Not because I was done. I did not know if I was done yet. That decision lived on the other side of information I did not have. But I was carrying a child that Reid knew about and had not told me he knew about. And there was a man named Harlan Cross attached to his deepest fear, and I had been described as temporary in a sentence that did not yet have its full meaning. And every single one of those facts put together added up to a situation that required me to be somewhere Reid could not reach me while I thought it through. I turned off the tap, dried my hands, walked back to the bedroom with the steady, careful movement of someone who was not making a decision yet, who was simply getting ready for bed, who was tired from a long week. I changed. I moved through the bathroom routine. I got into bed. Reid came in 20 minutes later, undressed in the dark, slid into bed on his side. His hand found mine under the blanket. He laced our fingers together, the automatic gesture of a long-practiced intimacy. I let him. I lay in the dark and I listened to his breathing slow and even out. And when it reached the particular rhythm that meant he was genuinely asleep, I lay there another 10 minutes to be certain. Then I carefully separated my hand from his. I got up. I did not pack a bag. Not yet. Not tonight. A missing bag was a declaration. Tonight was reconnaissance. Tonight was for getting out with what I absolutely needed and coming back before morning with the full picture clear in my head. I picked up my phone, my wallet, my keys, and the pregnancy test from the front pocket of my bag, still wrapped in the receipt from the pharmacy, still the most significant piece of information in the room. I put it in my jacket pocket, pressed my hand flat against my stomach once, brief and private, in the dark. I know, I thought, at the small, warm thing that had been pulsing its steady, insistent signal all week. I hear you. We're going. I walked to the bedroom door, turned back once. Reid, asleep, one arm extended across the space where I had been, his face without its careful architecture in sleep, open and unguarded and heartbreakingly familiar. If Harlan finds out about the baby, I lose everything. I stepped out into the hall and pulled the door quietly closed behind me. The hallway was dim, just the one overhead light that flickered slightly when the heat came on, a thing the building manager had been addressing since February with no measurable results. Mrs. Adeyemi's gardenia pushed its sweetness under her door. Somewhere on the floor above, a television murmured at low volume. I stood in the ordinary quiet of it and breathed. Then I took the stairs down, crossed the lobby, and walked out into the November night. Hartford at this hour was not empty. It was just quieter. The daytime frequency of the city settling into something lower and more honest. Fewer people performing their days, and more people simply existing in them. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and clean, cutting through the warmth I had been carrying out of the apartment like something that needed to be addressed. Good, I needed the cold. The cold was clarifying. I did not have a destination yet. What I had was a name, Harlan Cross. I walked. Prospect Avenue at night had a particular quality. The old Victorian houses, set back from the sidewalk behind their bare November trees. Windows lit from inside, the occasional porch light casting a yellow circle onto the dead grass. I had walked this street hundreds of times. I knew which house had the broken gate that scraped the concrete. I knew which corners smelled like someone's wood smoke in the evenings. I knew this street the way you know the details of a life you have settled into without noticing. Harlan Cross, alpha of the Cross Pack in Providence, territory that bordered the Callaway claims at the northern edge of Hartford County, a boundary that had been negotiated and renegotiated across decades, a line that both packs treated with the careful attention of two people sharing an armrest on a long flight. I had met him once. The territory summit had been 8 months ago, a pack gathering at a rented hall in Glastonbury, the kind of formal event that Reid attended in his alpha in charge mode, which meant he was simultaneously everywhere and unreachable, moving through the room with that particular gravity that powerful people generate, conversations finding him rather than the other way around. I had gone as his mate, which meant a specific role and a specific set of expectations, and I had navigated it with the competence of someone who had been doing this long enough to know where the landmines were. Harlan Cross had found me at the drinks table. He was Reid's age, maybe a year or two older, with the kind of physical presence that preceded him into rooms, broad-shouldered and unhurried, with light eyes that moved across a crowd the way a chess player scans a board. He had introduced himself with perfect courtesy, and I had shaken his hand and smiled and said the correct things. And my telepathy had caught something in the first 15 seconds that I had filed away and not examined because I was at a professional event and I did not read people without cause. What I had caught was interest, not the social kind, not the political kind, the specific, targeted interest of a person who has been thinking about you before you arrived. I had put it in a drawer in my mind labeled "Things to be aware of" and closed it. Now I was taking it back out. I stopped walking. I was at the corner of Prospect and Asylum, the irony of the street name not lost on me, standing under a streetlight with my hands in my pockets and my mind moving fast through the pieces I had. Reid knew about the baby. Reid had not told me he knew. Reid was afraid of Harlan Cross finding out. Reid had told Marcus I was temporary. Reid was grieving and guilty and afraid for me specifically, not for himself. The shape underneath all of it was starting to resolve. This was not a story about Reid wanting to leave me. This was a story about Reid being forced into something. The distinction was important and also made everything significantly more complicated because a man choosing to leave you was a wound you could work with, could orient yourself around, could use as a clean edge to cut from. A man being maneuvered into something against you was a different architecture of pain entirely, the kind that had no clean edge, only the slow, terrible discovery of how many walls had been moved while you were looking at something else. My phone buzzed, not Reid this time. A number I did not have saved, Providence area code. I stared at it for a long moment, answered. Elias Carter, not a question. A man's voice, smooth and deliberate, with the particular quality of someone who had been waiting for a specific moment and had decided this was it. Every hair on my arms went up. Who is this? I said. Someone who has been trying to decide whether to make this call for approximately 6 months. A pause, measured, controlled. My name is Declan Cross. Harlan is my brother. I said nothing. I'm going to guess, Declan said, based on the fact that you answered a strange number at 11 at night and you sound like someone standing in the cold trying to work something out, that tonight was the night you found out some version of what's actually happening. The street light above me buzzed faintly. "Talk," I said, a small sound that might have been relief. "Okay, here is what I need you to understand first. I am not calling you because I am my brother's person. I am calling you because my brother has been building something that is going to hurt people who do not deserve to be hurt. And I have been carrying that knowledge for 6 months, trying to figure out what to do with it." "Declan," my voice was very level. "I am standing outside in November at 11 at night, and I am not a patient person under normal circumstances. Tell me what you know." "Harlan wants the Calloway territory," he said, "not through force, through alliance. He has been working on Reid for over a year, positioning it as a mutual benefit arrangement, a merger of pact claims that would give both families significantly more political leverage in New England." "And Reid's role in this arrangement?" I said. A pause. "Harlan has a daughter, 24, Omega. The arrangement involves a formal mating bond between her and Reid to consolidate the alliance." Another pause. "It was supposed to have been finalized already. Reid has been stalling." The cold was not doing the clarifying thing anymore. The cold was just cold. "Reid has been stalling," I said, "for months. Every time Harlan sets a timeline, Reid finds a reason to extend it. Harlan is losing patience. He gave Reid a deadline. End of the month. End of the month. November. 9 days away." "Why are you telling me this?" I said. "Because Reid asked Harlan 6 weeks ago for more time. He said he needed to resolve a personal matter first." Declan's voice dropped slightly. "Harlan told me he suspected the personal matter was you, and then he told me that if Reid's Omega turned out to be pregnant, Reid would lose any remaining negotiating position, and Harlan would move to force the alliance through pact law rather than agreement." The pregnancy test in my jacket pocket felt like it had developed a heartbeat of its own. 6 weeks ago. Reid had asked for more time 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks was exactly when I would have conceived. Reid knew. Reid had found out somehow, before I did, or at the same time, and he had gone to Harlan and asked for more time, and Harlan had essentially told him that a pregnant Omega mate was the one thing that could dismantle the entire arrangement, because a mating bond could not be dissolved while carrying a child under pact law. Which meant, I pressed my hand against my mouth, which meant the baby was not a complication in Reid's exit from this relationship. The baby was the reason he was trying to find a way out of the arrangement entirely. The baby was the thing he was protecting. I was the thing he was protecting. I sat down on someone's front steps. I did not have permission to sit on these steps, and I did not care even slightly. "Elias," Declan's voice, careful, "are you still there?" "I'm here," I said. I stopped, started again. "Why does Reid not know that you've told me this?" "Because Reid is trying to handle this himself, and he is running out of time, and he is going to make a decision in the next 9 days that he believes protects you and the child, and that will cost him everything he has built. And I think he deserves to not do that alone." A pause. "And because I have been watching my brother use good people as leverage for 20 years, and I am tired of it." I looked up at the sky above Hartford, the low orange city glow against the clouds, no stars visible but the sense of enormous space beyond the light. "You said Reid asked for more time to resolve a personal matter," I said. "What does resolve mean in the context Harlan used it?" Silence on the other end, the careful kind. "Declan." "Harlan believed resolve meant end," he said quietly. "End the personal complication before the alliance formalized. End the personal complication. End me. Not violently. I did not believe Harlan had meant it violently. Pack politics did not work that way, not openly. But there were quieter ways to end a complication. A dissolved bond. A removed Omega. A formal separation filed through PAC administrative channels that would take me off the board without breaking any laws. Reid had asked for time to resolve the complication and had spent 6 weeks doing absolutely nothing that looked like resolving. Because of course he had. Because the man upstairs asleep with his arm across my empty space on the mattress was grieving and guilty and afraid for me. And the thing I had read as a death sentence for our relationship had been Reid buying time he didn't know how to spend. I breathed out slowly. "Where are you?" I asked Declan. "Currently parked on Asylum Avenue, about a block from where you're sitting." I turned around. A dark car at the end of the street, engine off. A figure in the driver's seat. Of course. "You drove to Hartford," I said. "I've been trying to find the right moment to approach you for 3 weeks," he said. "Tonight, when Reid's call stopped going through, I thought maybe the moment had found itself." I stood up from the steps. I walked toward the car. Declan Cross was younger than his brother by several years, lighter in coloring, with none of Harlan's board game stillness. He got out when he saw me coming, which I appreciated as a gesture of non-threat, standing beside the car with his hands visible, a person trying to communicate that he was not the version of his family he was apologizing for. His emotional frequency was exactly what his voice had been, conflicted, earnest, the particular exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a moral weight they were not built to carry alone. I stopped a few feet from him. He looked at me. I looked at him. "You could have called 3 weeks ago," I said. "I know. I've been walking around for 3 weeks with exactly 0 pieces of this information." "I know. I'm sorry. I found out tonight by accident I was bringing coffee." Something crossed his face. Genuine pain. "I'm sorry," he said again, and this time it landed differently, carrying actual weight rather than social reflex. I wrapped my arms around myself against the cold. "Tell me everything," I said, "not the summary, everything." Declan Cross leaned against his car, and in the orange glow of a Hartford streetlight at 11 at night, with the November cold pressing in on all sides, he told me the full shape of what my life had been built on top of for the last 8 months without my knowledge. I listened to all of it, every piece. And when he was done, I stood in the quiet for a long moment, turning it over, finding its edges, understanding its weight. Then I said very calmly, "Reid has been trying to protect me from your brother for 8 months." "Yes," Declan said. "And in doing so, he has been performing the exact thing that looked, from the outside, like he was planning to leave me." "Yes. And he has not told me any of this because he believed that keeping me unaware was part of keeping me safe." "That's my understanding." I considered this. "That," I said, "is the single most well-intentioned and profoundly stupid strategy I have ever heard in my life, and I once watched a man try to fix a gas leak with duct tape." Declan blinked. "He was trying to protect you," he said carefully. "He was trying to protect me the way someone puts a priceless object in a locked room so nothing can get to it, without asking the object if it wanted to be put in a room." I pressed my fingers to my temple. I could have helped. I have literally the most useful ability for this specific type of situation, and he has been managing this alone for 8 months because he decided I needed to not know. To be fair, he doesn't know about your ability. I know he doesn't know. That is also a conversation we are going to have. I dropped my hand. After I deal with the fact that his deadline is in 9 days, and he currently believes I don't know any of this. "What are you going to do?" Declan asked. Good question. The same question Cora had asked me 3 hours ago in her apartment, and the answer had been different then because the information had been different. The map had changed completely. The destination was the same. I needed to be somewhere safe. I needed space to think. I needed Reid not to be able to manage this alone into a wall. But the reason had changed. I was not leaving because Reid had chosen to leave me. I was leaving because Reid was trapped and too proud and too alpha to ask for help. And the only way to make him understand that he needed to start talking to me was to remove the assumption that I was safely contained and unaware. I needed him scared, not hurt, scared. There was a difference. I needed the man who had been quietly trying to protect me to understand that his quiet protection had almost cost him everything, and that the person he was protecting was not, as it turned out, someone who needed to be kept in a room. I looked at Declan Cross. "I need somewhere to go tonight," I said. "Not far, just not that apartment." He nodded immediately. "I have a hotel on Trumbull Street. I booked 2 rooms." "You booked 2 rooms?" "I told you I've been planning this approach for 3 weeks." I stared at him. "You are either extremely thoughtful or mildly unhinged," I said. "Probably both," he said. "It runs in the family. The useful version of it, I mean." "Not," he stopped. "Not my brother's version." I looked back up the street toward the building on Prospect Avenue. Reid's window, still lit. He was awake. My chest did the complicated thing again. "Okay," I said quietly. Not to Declan, to the window. To the man inside it who had been carrying 8 months of something alone because he thought love looked like shielding. I was going to show him what it actually looked like. It looked like standing in the open. "Okay," I said again, to Declan this time, turning away from the window. "Let's go." "Let's go," I said, and followed Declan Cross down Asylum Avenue toward a hotel I had never been to, in a city I knew entirely too well, on the worst and most clarifying night of my adult life. The Trumbull Street Hotel was a converted brick building, the kind that Hartford had several of, old industrial architecture that had been given warm lighting and a front desk person who did not ask questions at 11 at night, which was exactly the energy I needed. Declan checked in without ceremony. The elevator was small and smelled like carpet cleaner and the quiet judgment of a long day. He handed me a key card on the 2nd floor. "Room 214. "There's a coffee maker," he said, "and I want you to know I'm not going to be weird about the fact that you're essentially a stranger and I've just driven you to a hotel." "I appreciate that acknowledgement," I said. "I also want to say, for the record, that I think you're handling this with a level of composure that is genuinely alarming." "Thank you. I grew up in a complicated pack. Composure was survival." He looked at me for a moment with something in his expression that was not pity, but was adjacent to it. The kind of recognition that passes between people who have both learned to be fine in rooms where being fine was the only available option. "Get some sleep if you can," he said. "We can talk strategy in the morning." "We're not talking strategy in the morning," I said pleasantly. "I'm talking strategy tonight. Knock in 20 minutes. He opened his mouth, closed it. "Okay," he said. I went into room 214 and sat on the edge of the bed and did not sleep, and did not try to sleep, and spent the 20 minutes doing the one thing I had been too emotionally reactive to do properly since the hallway outside Reid's office. I thought. Not about feelings. I had plenty of feelings. The feelings were there, enormous and patient and waiting their turn. But feelings without information were just weather, and I had spent enough of tonight getting rained on. I thought about structure, about the actual shape of the problem and what could be done with it. Harlan Cross wanted the Calloway territory. He was using his daughter as the instrument of acquisition, which was so deeply old pack politics that it would have been fascinating if it was not currently my life. He had given Reid a deadline, 9 days. Reid had been stalling for 8 months, buying time he did not know how to convert into an actual solution, protecting me from the knowledge of the threat by keeping me entirely outside of it. The pregnancy had changed Harlan's calculation. A bonded Omega carrying an alpha's child could not be displaced under pack law without the alpha's explicit consent and a formal dissolution proceeding that took months and required cause. Harlan had told Reid that a pregnant mate was a liability to the arrangement. What Harlan had not said, but what I now understood from the structure of his pressure, was that he was also afraid of it. A child was a claim. A child was a pack legacy. A child made the Calloway line something that could not simply be absorbed into cross-territory through a convenient mating alliance, because it created a separate inheritance, a separate future, a separate claim that pack law would protect regardless of what the adults decided. The baby was not Reid's weakness in this situation. The baby was his leverage, and Harlan knew that, which was why the pressure had accelerated in the last 6 weeks, which was why the deadline had been set, which was why Reid had been backed into performing the role of a man preparing to end things with me, when what he was actually doing was stalling hard enough to bleed time until he found another way. I pressed my fingers together. The other way was me, not in the helpless sense, not in the sense of being a variable that needed protecting, in the sense that I was a telepathic Omega who had spent 6 years developing the ability to read the emotional truth of any room I walked into, who had a specific and granular understanding of Harlan Cross's fear, and who had just been handed every piece of information Reid had been managing alone for 8 months by the one person inside Harlan's own household who had decided he was done watching his brother run people. Reid had been playing defense. I was going to play something else entirely. Declan knocked at 19 minutes. I opened the door. "Sit down," I said. He sat in the chair by the window. I stayed standing because I thought better on my feet, and also because I was about 5'10" and used it when I needed to, which was a skill I had developed in a complicated pack, and was not above deploying on a cross brother who owed me at least 8 months of ambient stress. "What does Harlan actually want?" I said. "Not the territory. The territory is what he's taking. What does he want to feel?" Declan looked at me. "That's a specific question." "I'm a specific person. Answer it." He thought for a moment, the genuine kind of thinking rather than the social delay kind. "Control. Harlan has spent his whole life feeling like the most powerful person in any room and being terrified it's not enough. He expands because standing still feels like losing ground. Who does he respect? Strength, not dominance. He has dominance. He respects people he can't easily read or predict. Has anyone ever called his bluff directly? Not without consequences. What kind of consequences? Legal ones, mostly. Pack administrative challenges, territory disputes filed through the council. He's very good at using systems against people. Declan paused. Why? Because the way to beat someone who uses systems is to become the thing the system cannot touch, I said. And pack law has one category of protection that supersedes almost every other claim. Declan's eyes shifted. A bonded mating with a child in progress, he said slowly. Not just that, I looked at him. An Omega who formally registers his pregnancy with the Hartford Pack Administrative Office before Harlan's deadline creates a public record that triggers automatic pack law protection for the primary Omega's residence, bond, and lineage. It cannot be administratively challenged without a formal hearing that takes a minimum of 60 days. I tilted my head. I know pack law reasonably well for someone who grew up in a pack that used it against us constantly. I paid attention. Declan stared at me. You're going to register the pregnancy, he said. I'm going to do several things, I said. The registration is step one, but none of it works if Reid doesn't know what I know. And Reid finding out I know changes everything about how he's been managing this, which means the next conversation I have with him is the one that costs the most. I stopped, because my phone, sitting on the bedside table, had just lit up. Not a call, a text. Reid. I crossed the room and picked it up. You're not here. 3 words, no punctuation. The text of a man who had reached across a cold mattress and found the answer he had been most afraid of. My chest tightened. Then another text 30 seconds later. Elias, please tell me where you are. Then a third, and this one stopped me completely because it was not the controlled alpha managing his communication. It was just a person. I should have told you. I know I should have told you. Please just tell me you're safe. I sat down on the edge of the bed, Declan, reading the room, stood quietly. "I'll give you a minute." He went to the door. I did not stop him. He stepped out and pulled it almost closed behind him, and I sat in room 214 at 11:30 at night, holding my phone with Reid's 3 texts sitting on the screen like something that had been waiting to be said for 8 months. "I should have told you." He knew I was gone, and he knew why. Maybe not the specific reason, maybe not the full version, but Reid was not a man who required complete information to understand the shape of a situation, and the shape of this one was not ambiguous. His Omega was gone in the middle of the night with no bag and no note, and had been not quite there all evening in a way he had chosen to not examine. And he was now sitting with the weight of everything he had decided I did not need to know. I typed back, "I'm safe." His response was immediate. "Where?" Not a question. The alpha in him, direct and stripped of politeness. The version of Reid that appeared when the controlled surface cracked through. I stared at the screen. Here was the choice point. Here was the place where the road split into the version of this story where I told him where I was, and he came and we had the conversation in a hotel room, in whatever emotional state we were both in right now, raw and sleepless and caring too much. Or the version where I held the information, let him sit with the not knowing, and came to him in the morning with the full shape of what I knew, and a clear head, and the complete advantage of having had time to organize it. I was not a cruel person, but I was also done being the person who accommodated Reid Calloway's timeline at the expense of my own. I typed, "We'll talk in the morning." His response took longer this time. Then, "Are you alone?" I almost typed yes. I caught myself. I typed, "I'm fine, Reid." Then I put the phone face down on the bedside table and pressed my hands against my knees and breathed through the thing that my chest was doing. The thing that had no clean name, that lived in the space between loving someone and refusing to be managed by them, between understanding why they made the choices they made and requiring them to understand why those choices were not acceptable. The phone buzzed twice more. I did not pick it up. I lay down on top of the covers in my clothes and stared at the ceiling of room 214 and thought about the word temporary. The thing about that word, the thing I had not let myself examine directly until now, was that it had not come from nowhere. Reid had said it to Marcus with the steadiness of a prepared sentence, which meant he had thought about it before he said it, which meant it had been part of whatever framework he was using to manage this situation. He had decided on a version of the story he was telling his second in command, a version in which I was temporary, and the reason he had decided on that story was almost certainly Harlan. If Harlan believed Reid was already in the process of resolving the personal complication, Harlan would hold the deadline rather than accelerating. Reid had been performing the story of a man ending his relationship in order to buy time, while privately doing the opposite. It was brilliant. It was also the most singularly maddening thing anyone had ever done to me. I was going to tell him that, directly and with complete clarity. I was going to tell him that whatever his intentions had been, whatever the love underneath them looked like, performing my disposal to a room that included his second in command, in a pack house with walls and doors that were not guaranteed to contain sound, had almost ended us. Not because of Harlan, because of what I had heard and what I had been prepared to do with it. I had been 20 minutes from starting to build a new life in a different city. I pressed my arm over my eyes. My phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it buzzed with the particular sustained vibration of an incoming call. And I reached over and picked it up without looking at the name because I already knew it, and I had apparently lost the ability to let it ring again now that I knew the full shape of why he was calling. I answered. Silence on both ends for one breath. "You were at the door," Reid said, not a question. I said nothing. "Outside my office, this afternoon." His voice was low and very controlled. "The coffee, you left one cup on the hall table. I found it when Marcus left." A pause. You heard me. Yes, I said. Another pause, longer. Elias, his voice cracked on the second syllable, not dramatically, the small structural kind of crack that happens in a sound when the thing producing it is under more load than it can continue to absorb without showing. I need you to understand that what you heard was not what it sounded like, I said softly. It was not what it sounded like. I know. Silence. You know, he said. I know, I said again. A longer silence this time with a different texture. The kind that happens when a person has been carrying a story alone for so long that being seen inside it produces something they were not prepared for. How much do you know? He asked. Most of it, I think, I said. Harlan, his daughter, the deadline, the reason you asked for more time 6 weeks ago. I paused. The reason you told Marcus I was temporary. His breath on the other end was audible. Not quite a sound, just the evidence of a person recalibrating from the ground up. I was protecting you, he said. I know that too. Elias. Reid. Please tell me where you are. I looked at the ceiling. I thought about 9 days, about PAC administrative offices and registration filings, and the specific architecture of PAC law that protected what Harlan Cross was most afraid of. I thought about Declan Cross outside in the hall and Cora Webb in Bloomfield, and the small, warm pulse that had been the only consistent thing in my chest for a week. I thought about a man asleep in a shared apartment with his arm across an empty space, and about the same man awake and scared on the other end of a phone line, having the conversation he had decided I did not need to have. I'll see you in the morning, I said. We're going to talk about all of it. Everything. I don't want to wait until morning. I know you don't. Elias, his voice, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than the chest. Past tense? He asked, very quiet. No, I said. Present, ongoing, extremely inconvenient given the circumstances. Another breath, this one with something different in it. The release of something that had been held too tight for too long. Come home, he said, in the morning. Elias. In the morning, Reid, because if I come back tonight, we will skip the part where we actually say all the things that need to be said and go straight to the part where we both feel better temporarily. And I need the words more than I need the temporary right now. Silence. Okay, he said finally. The single most difficult okay I had ever heard him produce. Okay, I said back. I ended the call. I lay in the dark of room 214 with the phone on my chest and the heat coming on through the vents and the distant sound of Hartford existing outside the window. And I felt, for the first time since the hallway, something that was not entirely made of crisis. It felt like standing on solid ground that had recently been underwater. Still wet, still unsteady, but solid. I put my hand on my stomach. 9 days, I said quietly to the ceiling, to the small, warm thing that had been pulsing at steady insistence since Monday morning. To myself. We have 9 days, and I have a plan, and your father is an extremely frustrating man who loves us more than he has the vocabulary for. The heat vent hummed. We're going to be fine, I said, and for the first time since Prospect Avenue, I believed it. I did not sleep immediately. That would have been too simple, too clean, and my body had not yet received the memo that we had arrived at a functional, emotional conclusion for the evening. What I did instead was lie on top of the covers in room 214 and let my mind do the thing it did when it was processing something too large to fold into a single night, which was to move through it slowly, the way you move through a house after a storm, checking each room for damage, noting what had held and what hadn't. What had held, Reid's love, present tense, intact. The warmth I had read in his frequency was not a lie and had never been a lie, and I needed to sit with that for a moment because it mattered. It mattered that in the middle of 8 months of political pressure and impossible choices, He had been protecting me with everything he had. It mattered badly that he had done it in exactly the wrong way, and I intended to say so clearly. But the foundation underneath the wrong method was something real. What hadn't held? The assumption that love was the same as transparency, that caring about someone meant they would tell you the truth about the things that scared them, that a bonded alpha who called you his would also, apparently without needing to be asked, treat you like a person who could handle the full weight of his reality. That assumption was on the floor in several pieces. We were going to have a very long conversation in the morning. I turned onto my side. My hand found my stomach in the dark, that automatic reaching gesture I had been doing all week. And I stayed there for a while, just breathing, just present, just the two of us in a hotel room in Hartford, while the city moved around us at its late-night frequency. And somewhere 3 blocks away on Prospect Avenue, Reid Calloway was almost certainly sitting up in the dark, waiting for a morning he had agreed to and hated. Good. Let him sit with it. Not cruelly. I was not operating from cruelty. But there was a specific and necessary discomfort that came with realizing you had been protecting someone by keeping them ignorant. And that discomfort needed to have time to fully mature before I walked back into the room. Because a Reid who had only been sitting with it for 5 minutes was going to lead with apology, and I needed him to lead with honesty instead. I closed my eyes, and somewhere between thinking about PAC administrative law and the specific cadence of the okay he had produced on the phone, I fell asleep. I woke to gray morning light through inadequate curtains and the sound of Declan Cross knocking on my door with the specific rhythm of someone who had been awake for a while and had opinions about it. I sat up, checked my phone. 11 missed calls, all Reid, spanning the hours between 1 and 4 in the morning and then stopping, which meant he had either fallen asleep or decided to respect the boundary I had set. And knowing Reid, it was probably a 40-60 split between the two. One text from Cora, sent at 6:15. I'm going to need you to tell me you're alive, or I'm going to start doing things. I texted back, alive, hotel on Trumbull, will explain everything later, do not do things. Her response was immediate. That sentence has so much story in it. So much story, I confirmed. Stay available today. Declan knocked again. I'm up, I said. There's coffee in the lobby, he said through the door. And Reid Calloway's car has been parked outside this building since approximately 4 in the morning. I stopped moving. What? Black Audi, Prospect plates. He's been in it for, a brief pause, 2 hours and 40 minutes, give or take. I sat on the edge of the bed. Reid had driven here, had found me, probably through the bond, the specific directional pull of a mating connection that worked like a compass when you were close enough, and had parked outside and sat in his car for almost 3 hours without coming in. Because I had said morning, because he had said okay, that cost him something. I knew how much it cost him because I knew his instincts, and his instincts were to move toward a problem and put his body between it and the thing he wanted to protect. And he had sat in a car in the dark for 3 hours instead because I had asked him to. My throat did the inconvenient thing. I got up, went to the window, pushed the curtain aside. The black Audi was directly below, parallel parked on Trumbull Street, engine off. I could see the outline of him in the driver's seat, head leaned back slightly, the particular stillness of a person who has been very awake for a long time. Okay, I said, to the window, to myself, to the small warm thing that sent up its now familiar pulse, as if in agreement. Okay, morning is now. I went to the bathroom, washed my face with cold water and looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. Elias Carter, 26, telepathic, 6 weeks pregnant, still in yesterday's clothes, about to go have the conversation that everything had been pointing toward since a hallway and 2 cups of coffee. I looked tired. I also looked, and this surprised me slightly, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I dried my face, went back to the door and opened it. Declan was leaning against the opposite wall with two paper coffee cups, wearing yesterday's clothes himself, with the look of someone who had also not slept particularly well, but had made peace with it. He handed me a cup. "How do you want to do this?" he asked. "I'm going down," I said, "alone." He nodded. "Declan." I held the cup with both hands, letting the warmth work on my fingers. "What you did last night, driving here, telling me, I know that wasn't easy." He looked at the floor for a moment. "It was easier than watching it happen," he said. "When this is over," I said, "and there will be an over, I'm going to need someone who knows Harlan's methods from the inside. Someone who can tell me when he's bluffing and when he isn't." Declan looked up. "I'm in," he said, no hesitation. "Good." I took a sip of the coffee. It was decent, better than the lobby of a converted brick hotel had any obligation to produce. "Stay up here until I text you. If this goes the way I think it's going to go, we're all going to have a very full day." I took the elevator down, crossed the lobby, pushed through the front door into the November morning. Hartford was cold and overcast. The sky the flat white of a day that had not decided what it wanted to do yet. The street mostly quiet at this hour, with just the early movers. A jogger, a woman walking fast with a travel mug, a delivery truck idling at the corner. Normal. The city stubbornly, persistently normal. The Audi was 20 feet away. I walked toward it. Reid saw me coming through the windshield. I watched him sit up, watched his hand move to the door handle, watched him check the impulse and stay still, giving me the approach, giving me the distance, managing himself the way he always managed himself, right up until the moment I got to the passenger door and opened it and got in. The car smelled like him, bergamot and warmth and the slight edge of a long night. And my body did its familiar involuntary thing, and I told my body that we were having a conversation first, and it could process the scent afterward. Reid looked at me. I looked at him. He looked terrible in the specific way of someone who had not slept and had spent the sleepless hours in a confined space with nothing but their own thoughts for company. His hair was not right. His jaw had the beginning of something past 5 o'clock shadow. His eyes were doing the fully unguarded thing they did when he was too tired to maintain the architecture of composure. He also looked, underneath all of that, so profoundly relieved to see me in front of him that my chest did the complicated thing again, and I let it this time because suppressing it was taking up energy I needed for other things. "Hi," I said. "Hi," he said. His voice was rough with the night. We sat in the quiet of the car for a moment. "You parked outside," I said. "You said morning." "Reid, you could have come in." "You said morning," he said again, simply. I wasn't going to push past that. I looked at my coffee cup. "Okay," I said. "Here is what we're going to do. I'm going to say things, and you are going to let me finish all of them before you respond. Not because I'm asking for submission, but because I have been holding this since approximately 6:45 yesterday evening. And if you interrupt me, I will lose the order of it, and the order matters." He nodded, immediately. "I was outside your office door yesterday," I said. "I heard you tell Marcus the arrangement was temporary. I heard the timing. I felt your emotional state when you said it." I watched his jaw tighten. "I am telepathic, Reid. I have been since I was 19. I don't use it on you without permission. I made that rule on our second date, and I kept it for 3 years. Yesterday was the first time I broke it, and I broke it because what I heard scared me badly enough that I needed to know the shape of it before I made a decision." He was very still. "The shape I found," I continued, "was not what I expected. You were not cold. You were not detached. You were grieving and guilty and afraid. And the fear was pointed at me, not for yourself." I kept my voice level. "And then last night I stood on Asylum Avenue, and a man named Declan Cross told me everything." Reid closed his eyes. "Everything," I said again carefully. "Harlan's plan, his daughter, Your deadline, the reason you asked for more time 6 weeks ago, the reason you performed the story of ending things to your second-in-command in a room with an open door. Elias, his voice was barely above a breath. I'm not finished. He went quiet. You have been carrying this alone for 8 months, I said. 8 months of Harlan's pressure and his timeline and his daughter and the territorial alliance and the threat underneath all of it. And at no point in 8 months did you look at me and say, this is what is happening. I need your help. You decided to protect me by keeping me outside of it. You decided that love looked like managing the danger alone and handing me a result rather than bringing me into the process. I turned to look at him directly. I need you to understand what that almost cost us, I said. Not because of Harlan, because of me. I was 20 minutes from starting to build a life somewhere else with our child, and a set of conclusions that were completely wrong because I only had half of the information, and you had decided I didn't need the other half. Reid's eyes opened. They were very bright in the flat morning light. I know, he said, low and wrecked. I know you know, I said. I need you to know that I know why you did it. I understand the logic of it. You were trying to keep me safe from a man who frightens me less than you apparently think he does. I set my coffee cup in the holder between us. I grew up in a pack where Omegas were managed, where information was rationed, where the people who claimed to love us made decisions about what we were strong enough to know. I held his gaze. You are not that. I do not believe you are that. But what you did looks like that from where I was standing, and I need you to sit with that. The silence in the car was the kind that takes up weight. Reid's hands were on his thighs. I could see the tension in them, the very slight tremor of a person who was receiving something difficult with everything they had and not deflecting. I sat with it all night, he said finally. I sat with it since I found the cup on the table. He stopped, breathed. I kept thinking about you standing at that door with the coffee. His voice broke on the last word, the same small structural crack I had heard on the phone, and he pressed his fingers to his mouth for a moment before continuing. And I couldn't stop thinking about what you must have been thinking, what it must have looked like. It looked like the end, I said, not unkindly. I know. Reid, look at me. He looked at me. I am not leaving you, I said. I want to be clear about that before we go any further. I am not leaving. I am not done. I am here in this car at 7 in the morning in yesterday's clothes because I love you and because our child deserves to grow up with both of us honest with each other. I paused. But I need you to never do this again. I need you to understand that I am not a thing that needs to be kept safe from your life. I am a person who lives inside it with you. Those are not the same thing. He was looking at me with the expression he had when he was past pretending to be composed. I'm sorry, he said. Not the social sorry, the kind that came from somewhere structural. I know you are, I said. I should have told you, months ago. I kept thinking I'd find a solution first, that I'd fix it and then tell you afterward, and you wouldn't have to carry any of it. His jaw worked. That was stupid. It was extremely stupid, I agreed. It was also very you, which is why I am choosing to address it as a pattern rather than a crime. Something moved through his expression, not quite a smile, the ghost of one, the kind that surfaces despite everything when a person says something that lands exactly right. You're not going to let me just apologize, are you? He said. I'm going to let you apologize, and then we're going to move directly into problem solving because we have 9 days and I have a plan, and your instinct to handle this alone just got officially overruled. He stared at me. You have a plan, he said. I have a plan. In the time since you found out last night, you developed a plan. Reid, I'm telepathic and I grew up in a hard pack, and I have been thinking about pack law since 11:30 last night. Yes, I have a plan. I picked up my coffee. Also, Declan is in the hotel upstairs, and he has information about Harlan's methods that you don't have, and he has decided to stop being his brother's silence. So we are going to need him. Reid's expression shifted. The alpha reading a situation, cataloging the assets. You trust Declan Cross, he said slowly. I trust his emotional frequency, which is not the same as trusting him completely, but it's enough to work with. I met his eyes. Do you trust me? No hesitation. Yes, he said. Then here is what we are going to do. I turned in the seat to face him fully. We are going to go back to the apartment. I am going to shower and change because I have been in these clothes for too long, and self-respect is non-negotiable. Then we are going to sit down together, all three of us, and I am going to tell you both exactly what I have in mind. I paused. And Reid? Yeah. Before all of that, before the plan and Declan and the 9 days, I looked at him steadily. I need you to say it. The thing you have been not saying, out loud, to me, not to Marcus, not to a closed door, not to a version of events where you were managing the narrative. To me. He understood immediately. His gray eyes fully open, no architecture between us. You're not temporary, he said. You have never been temporary. I said it to give Harlan a story that would buy us time, and I said it in a room I thought was contained, and I have hated every second of every day since I said it. His voice dropped lower, rougher. You're it, Elias. You have been it since the parking lot on New Britain Avenue, and I have done a spectacularly terrible job of making sure you knew that this year, and I'm sorry. The city was very quiet outside the windows. My eyes were doing something I was not going to dignify by cataloging. Okay, I said. My voice was slightly less steady than I would have preferred. Okay, he said. Okay. I reached over and put my hand over his on his thigh. His hand turned over and closed around mine, the immediate reflexive grip of someone who had been holding something tightly all night and had just been given somewhere real to put it. His thumb moved slowly across my knuckles. We sat like that for a moment. I'm scared, he said quietly. Not the way he had said it on the phone. Differently, more specific. Not of Harlan, of the fact that I almost lost you because I thought I knew better. You should be a little scared, I said. It was a very close thing. I know. But we're here, I said, both of us, and the baby is here. And we have 9 days and a plan and a cross brother who turned against his family for us, which is honestly more than I expected from a Thursday night. That ghost of a smile again, more present this time. You're not going to let me be tragic about this, he said. Absolutely not. We do not have time for tragic. We have time for strategic. I squeezed his hand once and let go. Text Declan. Tell him to come down in 30 minutes. We're going to the apartment first. Reid picked up his phone, stopped. Elias? Yeah. He looked at me with his gray eyes and his exhausted face, and everything he had been carrying visible in both of them. The grief and the guilt and the fear, and underneath all of it, that warm gold frequency, present and undiminished and entirely his. Thank you, he said, for not leaving. I looked at him for a moment. I almost did, I said honestly. I want you to know that. I almost drove to a different city. I know. Don't make me have to choose that again. I won't, he said, simply, without performance. I nodded. Okay, I said, drive us home. He started the car. The drive back to Prospect Avenue took 4 minutes. I know because I watched the streets pass without counting them for once. Just letting Hartford exist around us. The morning light going from flat white to something slightly warmer as the clouds shifted. The city waking up in its ordinary, unhurried way. Reid drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting on the center console between us. Not reaching, just present. And somewhere around the second block, I put my hand over his without making a decision about it. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. Some things didn't need words wrapped around them. The apartment smelled like him when we walked in, bergamot and old wood, and the particular quiet of a space that had been holding its breath all night. The coffee mug I had set in the sink was still there. The gardenia from downstairs pushed its sweetness faintly through the lobby. Everything exactly as left, the ordinary evidence of a life that had almost been walked away from, looking completely unchanged from the outside. "Shower first," Reid said. "Obviously shower first," I said. I look like someone who slept in a hotel in their clothes. "You slept?" "Briefly, more than you, clearly." He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was the architecture of one. I grabbed clean clothes and went to the bathroom and stood under hot water for a long time, letting the heat work on the tension that had been living in my shoulders since approximately 6:45 yesterday evening. The steam rose and the city moved outside the frosted window, and I stood in the middle of it and let myself feel, properly and completely, the full shape of the last 15 hours. The grief was still there. I was not going to pretend it wasn't. Something had broken in the hallway yesterday, a specific version of security I had built around the assumption of being fully known by the person who loved me. And that version was not coming back. What came after it would be different, harder earned, built on the actual foundation of two people who had seen each other's worst assumptions and chosen to stay anyway. Which was, I was fairly certain, a more solid material than the original. I turned off the water, dried off, looked at myself in the mirror again, less wrecked than last night. More like someone who had arrived somewhere, rather than someone still in transit. I got dressed and went back out. Reid was in the kitchen. He had made coffee, real coffee in the French press, and he was standing at the counter with his own mug, looking out the window at the backyard. The November garden bare and patient, waiting for a season that was still months away. He had changed too. Clean clothes, hair still damp, looking like himself again in the specific way of a person who had stepped back into their own skin after a night of being outside it. He heard me come in and turned, put a mug on the counter in front of me. I picked it up. We stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island for a moment, just the two of us, the coffee warm and the light thin, and the whole apartment still carrying the particular quality of a morning after something significant. "The plan," he said. "The plan," I confirmed. "Tell me." I wrapped both hands around the mug. "PAC administrative registration. I filed the pregnancy with the Hartford office today. The moment that registration is on record, it triggers automatic PAC law protection for our bond and our residence and the child's lineage. Harlan cannot move administratively against a formally registered pregnant Omega without initiating a formal hearing process that takes a minimum of 60 days. Reid's eyes sharpened. His deadline is 9 days. His deadline is 9 days, I agreed, which means if we file today, the deadline becomes legally irrelevant. He cannot force the alliance through PAC law while the protection is active. And 60 days gives us time to build an actual counter position. "He'll come at it differently," Reid said. "Harlan doesn't stop, he redirects." "I know. That's where Declan comes in. Declan knows every method Harlan uses, every administrative angle, every pressure point, every relationship he leverages. We're not just buying time, we're mapping the full territory of what he can do, so we can close each path before he gets to it." Reid was quiet for a moment, processing. I watched him do it, the alpha part of him moving through the strategic architecture the way it moved through territory decisions, systematically and thoroughly. "You thought all of this through last night," he said. "Between 11:30 and when I fell asleep, yes. While you were furious with me. I contain multitudes, Reid." He looked at me across the island. Something in his expression was doing the open, unguarded thing, the gray eyes fully present, no management between us. "You would have done this alone," he said. "If I hadn't called, if Declan hadn't told you, you would have figured out the shape of it and built a counter strategy by yourself." "Probably," I said, "but alone would have been slower and significantly more exhausting. and I have a personal policy against unnecessary exhaustion. Elias. Yeah, I need to tell you something else. He set his mug down, straightened slightly. The tell of a person preparing to say something they have been organizing internally. 6 weeks ago, when I found the appointment reminder, when I realized you were pregnant, he stopped, started again. I went to Harlan the next day, not to negotiate, to tell him it was over, that I wasn't going through with the arrangement. I went still. He threatened you, Reid said. His voice dropped to something quieter and more dangerous. Not directly. Harlan doesn't do direct. He talked about how vulnerable Omegas were in contested territory situations, how pack law had interesting gaps around Omega protections in disputed claims, how he hoped nothing would complicate your situation here. He met my eyes. It was a promise dressed as a concern, and I understood exactly what he was saying. The cold that moved through me had nothing to do with the temperature. He threatened the baby, I said. He threatened the possibility of you being safe, Reid said. And I came home that night and looked at you making dinner and talking about the Simsbury client, and I could not find a way to say any of it without making the threat more real by naming it. So I went back to the strategy of controlling the narrative, of making him believe I was complying, of buying time. I set my mug down, crossed the kitchen, stood directly in front of him. He looked down at me, gray eyes level and honest, and carrying the weight of 6 weeks of that particular silence. Listen to me very carefully, I said. I understand why you made every choice you made. I understand the fear underneath all of it. I understand that you were trying to build a wall between me and something dangerous with your own body and your own silence and your own reputation. I held his gaze. And I need you to understand that I am not a person who needs a wall. I am a person who will stand beside you and help you build something better than a wall. His jaw worked. I know that now, he said quietly. Good. I reached up and put my hand against the side of his face. He leaned into it. Immediately, completely, the way a person leans into something they have been needing and refusing to ask for. His eyes closed. His hand came up and covered mine, pressing it against his cheek, holding it there. I'm sorry, he said again. Different this time. Not the structural apology, the personal one, the one that knew what it was apologizing for specifically. I know, I said. I love you, he said, still quiet, eyes still closed, saying it the way he said things when he had stopped managing the presentation of them. Not as an arrangement, not as a timeline, not as anything with an endpoint. He opened his eyes. You are the most inconveniently essential person in my entire life, and I have been an idiot about it for 8 months. You have, I agreed. I'm going to do better. You are, I agreed. You're not going to make this easy for me, he said, and now the ghost of a smile was fully present, tired and warm and real. Absolutely not, I said. You are going to earn every day of my good opinion from here forward, and you are going to be grateful for the opportunity. He laughed, a real one, short and surprised and coming from somewhere genuine. The laugh that appeared when something landed exactly right. The one I had always privately considered the best sound Reid Calloway produced, which was a fact I had never told him and intended to continue withholding on the grounds that he did not need additional information about his own appeal. He pulled me into his chest. His arms came around me, both of them, the full hold that his body had been building toward since I walked back into the kitchen, and I let myself go into it the way I had not let myself go into anything since the hallway. The warmth of him, the bergamot and the solidity and the heartbeat under my ear going slightly fast but steady, the specific frequency of him that my body had organized itself around for 3 years. His face came down against my hair. Hi, he said very quietly against the top of my head. Hi, I said into his shirt. We stood in the kitchen like that for a long moment. The sun did something behind the clouds outside, a shift that sent a thin strip of light across the floor and disappeared. The French press sat on the counter with the last of the coffee going slowly cold. The gardenia pushed its sweetness under the door from downstairs. "Reid," I said into his chest. "Yeah, I need to tell you something." "Tell me." "About my ability." I pulled back slightly, enough to look up at him. "I should have told you years ago. I made a rule about not reading you because I wanted to respect your privacy, and I stand by the principle of that. But you should have known. You deserve to know who you were bonded to completely." He looked at me. Something moved through his expression. Not surprise exactly. Something more like the quiet recognition of a piece snapping into place. "The way you always knew when something was off," he said slowly, "before I said anything." "Yes. And last night, yes." He was quiet for a moment, processing. "How long have you been able to do it?" "Since I was 19. Dr. Fenn in New Haven helped me develop the control." I kept his gaze. "I am not in your head constantly. I have spent 3 years actively looking away, but I can read emotional frequency and surface-level thought when my defenses are down and someone is broadcasting at high intensity. And last night I was broadcasting at very high intensity," he said. "You were essentially a radio tower," I confirmed. He breathed out slowly. "That's why you knew. Last night, how much you knew." Declan gave me the facts. Your feelings gave me the truth underneath them. I held his eyes. "You were never cold, Reid, not once. Everything you did came from love and fear, and I read both of them, and I need you to know that." He pressed his forehead down to mine. We stood like that, foreheads together, the small space between us warm and quiet. "No more secrets," he said. "No more secrets," I said, "from either of us. From either of us." He tilted his head and his lips found mine, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that was not about heat, but about arriving somewhere. His hand cradled the back of my head, unhurried, and I kissed him back with everything the night had cost me and everything the morning had returned. The grief and the relief and the love that had somehow come through 15 hours of crisis with its roots completely intact. When we pulled apart, his eyes were very soft. "Hi," he said again, barely a breath. "You already said hi," I said. "I'm saying it again. Emotionally indulgent." "Completely," he agreed, and kissed me once more, brief and warm. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Declan, in the lobby, no rush. Also, I found better coffee." I showed Reid the text. He looked at it. "You like him," he said, not accusatory, observational. "I trust his frequency," I said, "which is not the same thing, and I explained that already." "You like him," Reid said again. "He drove to Hartford for us. That earns a baseline of goodwill." Reid picked up his mug, looked at it, set it down and picked up his phone, typed something. His message to Declan, "Come up, doors open." He looked at me over the phone. "Is that okay?" "That's okay," I said. And it was. It genuinely was. Not just okay as in functional, okay as in the beginning of something. Okay as in the 3 of us in a kitchen in Hartford, with 9 days and a plan, and the specific kind of purpose that comes from deciding to stop managing a problem and start actually solving it. Declan knocked and came in looking like a man who had found better coffee and was cautiously optimistic about the room he was walking into. He read the atmosphere, the way someone with good instincts reads a room, and something in his posture settled. "Okay," he said, "where do we start?" "Sit down," I said. "I'll walk you both through it." They sat. I stood. I walked them through the full plan, all of it, the registration and the timeline and the legal architecture and the points where Declan's inside knowledge of Harlan's methods mapped onto the gaps I needed to close. Reid listened without interrupting, the alpha part of him fully present and tracking, asking precise questions at precise moments. Declan filled in the pieces I didn't have, specific names, specific channels, the particular administrative relationship Harlan used in 2 different counties that we needed to move around rather than through. It took 40 minutes. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet for a moment. Then Reid said, "The registration filing. You need a witness from outside the immediate bond." "I know," I said. He looked at Declan. Declan looked at me. "I'll witness it," Declan said. Reid nodded, slowly. The nod of a man accepting something that cost him something, accepting it anyway. "Then we go today," Reid said. He looked at me. "All 3 of us." "All 3 of us," I said. The Hartford PAC administrative office was on Farmington Avenue, 6 blocks from the clinic where I had sat alone on Monday morning with my paper cup of lukewarm tea and my enormous, uncertain feeling. I did not sit alone this time. The waiting room was ordinary, plastic chairs and a number dispenser, and a notice board with PAC territory updates, and a receptionist who handed us the forms with the efficient warmth of someone who had processed a great many significant moments in an unremarkable room. Reid filled in his portion. I filled in mine. Declan signed the witness line with the careful deliberateness of someone who understood what the signature meant in the context of who his brother was. The receptionist processed the filing, stamped it, entered it into the system, handed us a confirmation receipt with a case number and a processing date. Official, on record, protected. I looked at the receipt. Reid's hand found the small of my back. I leaned into it slightly. The thing about permanence, the real kind, is that it does not arrive with ceremony. It does not announce itself. It does not look like the moment you imagined. It looks like a stamped form in a beige waiting room on a November morning with thin winter light coming through the windows and the man you love standing at your shoulder and a baby the size of something very small and very determined, making its steady, insistent pulse in your chest. It looks like ordinary. It looks like this. We walked out onto Farmington Avenue, the 3 of us, the cold hitting clean and immediate, the city going about its Thursday with complete indifference to the fact that 9 days had just been rendered moot in a PAC administrative office by a telepathic Omega who had spent Monday morning alone and was spending Thursday morning decidedly not. Reid looked at me in the pale morning light. "What now?" he said. "Now," I said, "we go to Cora's, because she has been sending me increasingly threatening texts since 6:15, and she is a nurse with opinions, which is the most dangerous combination of attributes a person can have." He laughed again, the real one. "And after Cora's," he said. I looked up at the sky above Hartford, the clouds moving now, genuinely moving, the white breaking up into gray and pale blue, the city going silver and bright at the edges where the sun was pushing through. "After Cora's," I said, "we make Harlan Cross understand that he overestimated what he could take and significantly underestimated what he was taking it from." Reid put his arm around my shoulders, pulled me into his side, his lips pressed to my temple, warm and certain. "I love you," he said, into my hair, simply. "I know," I said, into his shoulder. "You're not going to say it back right now, are you?" "I said it last night on the phone." "You said it in the context of calling me an impossible person." "That was affectionate." "Elias." I tilted my head up to look at him, his gray eyes completely open, the Hartford sky behind him going slowly and unstoppably toward light. "I love you," I said. "You are the most well-intentioned, profoundly infuriating, genuinely essential person I have ever known, and our child is going to have your eyes and my ability to read a room, and Harlan Cross does not stand a single chance." Something moved through Reid's expression that I did not have a word for. The fullest version of his face, the one he only showed in the complete absence of audience. He held me tighter. I let him. Declan, walking slightly ahead of us, looked back over his shoulder, took in the scene, turned around again and said nothing, which was the correct call and demonstrated better social instincts than his brother had managed in a lifetime. We walked down Farmington Avenue in the November morning, the three of us, the city opening up around us, the light continuing its slow work on the clouds. My hand found my stomach briefly. One breath. Private. The small, warm pulse answered immediately, steady and sure, the same way it had been answering all week. I hear you, it seemed to say. Or maybe that was me saying it to myself, or to Reid, or to the version of our life that had almost not made it to this morning and had made it anyway. I hear you. We're okay. We're staying.